There's no second best. Take all your money and buy Bitcoin.
You can wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. GM. Alright, today is Monday, pre-election day. It is the 4th. Trump's odds are starting to rise ever so slightly after dipping down there. If we go into a view over the week, bottomed out last week on the 3rd of November, it was only a couple of days ago, at 53% to 47, roughly. Up now to about 57 and 42 again, so seems like Trump is comfortably in the lead in the betting markets, and it'll probably stay that way. I know there's a lot of talk about these about the individual states, and you see some of them were going, like some of them were having fluctuations away from Trump and like towards Harris towards the weekend, and that is all, I think, evened out a bit. I think Pennsylvania was one where there's pretty clear signs of manipulation. Yeah, I mean, this kind of thing, this is manipulation of betting markets, right? So these are very, very, very thinly traded markets. There's only been 25 million of volume in total. But the open interest on this, because volume doesn't really matter. What matters is open interest, like how big the bets are. And Polymarket are actually pretty obscure about their open interest, which is not great. They really should have more public open interest, but it really just doesn't look good for them because the open interest is not that high. Even on the main election betting market, I think it's only like 100 million or something, one or a couple 100 million, even though there's billions of volume. Anyway, so this took a nosedive from 56% to like all the way down to 50-48. And Harris even went into the lead, 51-49, and then it's came all the way back, right back to where it was. So if you imagine like an overextended dump on a chart, right? If price goes down too low, too fast, where it's just triggering stops and liquidations, and it'll mean revert back to where it came from, like here, for example. Sharp, sudden move down, tax liquidity moves back up, consolidates back where it was. It's very, very, very similar because remember the same dynamics happen on betting markets. It is supply and demand. It is flows. So in those swing states, it seems like Trump is still leading. But when you go to, what was the polls? U.S. election polls. Aggregate poll. There it is. Which one did I look at the other day? It's this one, isn't it? That shows all of them. Trump versus Harris. Yeah, national odds. So in the lead up to the 2020 election, Biden was plus 6.9 and Clinton was plus 3.2. And currently the average is Trump 0.01. So ever so slightly in the lead. Which people say that there is polls tend to underrepresent Trump. I wonder will that be the case, because in 2016 that was definitely true, in 2020 that was true, but I think it was less of a disparity in 2020 than it was in 2016, and I don't think it's like a rule of polls that they're going to underrepresent Trump. It might just be that as each election goes past, the polls become actually more, how would I say it? They would account for Trump's actual chances a bit more. So if anything, you might find the polls being closer this time than they have been in the past. Anyway, GM. So, charts. We've had our weekly close. Bitcoin closed with a green week with a massive wick. Everyone's seen this wick. It's funny. I mentioned earlier in the week, right? So I put out lessons and videos and talked about it when we were pumping last week, and we had this big Tuesday candle. Don't FOMO. Don't suddenly feel like you have to get in or it's the last chance. And there was so much of this. It's not even a week ago, 6 days ago. And it was all just, we're going so much higher. Imagine being sidelined. You not on board. How could you not be on board? Blah, blah, blah. All this fucking bullshit. And what do? Came all the way back. And not a bad chart, right? All things considered. Now, it needs to, in the next 1 or 2 days, I would say, if it's going to have the similar kind of continuation, like an immediate continuation, Bitcoin would need to reclaim the monthly open about above 70 and start closing daily candles above 70. If it does, that will set up higher. Right? So if we see it, because the daily bands, if they start to fail and you start to see closes below them and you start to see price not respecting the uptrend, you're going to go in for a period of consolidation and pullback. If it holds, like it did over here, if it holds and is able to actually flip these levels, that's when you'll see the market having its best chance. Let me just get rid of that actually. That's when you'll see the market having its best chance to move higher. And in that case, I think we would go for a breakout in November or possibly later in November towards December. And it holds and holds and holds the daily uptrend that's developing. If it doesn't, and this will all hinge around the election itself, if it ends up just chopping around in here, it's more likely to spend time consolidating before a move up. And you probably see sweeps of some of these lows, at least that low. You maybe even see a sweep down to the lows below. But really, it's going to depend. Is this turning into a trend? It is a deep pullback, but it's definitely making a higher low currently. Because if we go back to the main chart over here, we're inside that previous daily candle, so a daily order block that produced that push towards all-time highs. We're pulling back into it. So any kind of higher low that forms in here above the daily market structure is good from a structure perspective. We zoom it in further. We can see on the 1 hour chart a few different levels. I'll take off these bands. They're not super important right now. But we've got some of these levels. I've marked the CME opens. That was when the futures opened last night. We initially dipped below, got back above, took out the highs, came back down. So we have Sunday's high, Saturday's high. So the weekend, or sorry, Sunday's open and Saturday's open. So the two daily opens over the weekend above as resistance. Our weekly open for this week is just right here. We're basically right around it, kind of ping-ponging around it. And below that, we have last week's open. So there would be your levels in between. This red line is important. This is the low that was set here during the week. So that was the low that was set on Friday that we then went down below. So that's like the liquidity level that had been trapped. So on Saturday, price pushed down, or Sunday, price pushed down, stay below it, trap longs below it, trap shorts if we get above. But currently, longs are trapped above here, and we haven't yet started to squeeze any shorts up. If we do, target above is that high. Lots of stops will be there, 71.6. So I suspect that in the day pre-election, I mean, if we go back and we look at a couple of past election cycles like 2020 and 2016, because it's pre-election, I expect it to be a bit like the market is before a Fed meeting, or before it is before how it is before a big inflation number or jobs data or whatever, where the market really gets quiet. So if we're looking here at the 2020 election, which is, it was here, the 3rd of November, right? It was over here, yeah. So this was the 2020 election. Knock off these levels, don't need those. And so this was the Tuesday. And this was the Monday. So off the weekly open. So the Monday pre-election last cycle, we did have a decent bit of volatility to trade. You got a nice move down, and then you got a reversion bounce into resistance and then consolidation, and then it started to move up Tuesday and then trended up proper from Wednesday onwards in 2016. But overall, that's if you look at the daily candle for the Monday, it's a red candle, but it's within the previous range, so relatively low volatility, relatively quiet. Go back to 2016, all the way back here. Where are we? October going into November. That was the big flush pre-election, because the election last year was on the 8th. If we zoom in on that, you'll see this. So we had Tuesday, and we had Monday being here. There. This is what you want to watch out for today. This is basically no trade zone, do nothing, price barely moves. And so price had a big move down on the Thursday pre-election. Exact same as this year. We had a big move down on the Thursday pre-election. So put that side by side. 1 hour. Let me look at this here. We had our big Thursday move down. Followed through on Friday into Saturday into Sunday. But essentially, so if we look over here, essentially consolidation in here would lead to some kind of a very, very tight consolidation that would just be within this range. Right, so you're going to see something like that. It moves up, it moves down, but it stays in this very choppy range. And there's no major move. So if that happens, don't be surprised. Markets, the closer you get to this big event, can really compress with volatility decreasing. And then, of course, this I think was when Trump was declared the winner. You saw the big move, and then the markets reacted on through the rest of the week with volatility. So looking at that, I also want to look at what was Bitcoin dominance doing at the time. It's actually quite an interesting one. So how was Bitcoin dominance back in 2016? Where were we in relation to a Bitcoin dominance cycle? If we come out of this, here's November 2020, Bitcoin dominance. And price in 2020. So here, 3rd of November, Bitcoin dominance was in a strong uptrend, had been trending up since September. And that election led to the last push in Bitcoin dominance for a couple of weeks post-election before a drop-off. That's when you would have seen a bit of altcoin outperformance. And then Bitcoin dominance went for its last big push into the end of December as Bitcoin hit all-time high, and then alt started to really run after that. 2016, zoom it out all the way back over here. 2016, see it over here, where are we? November 16. In November 16, Bitcoin dominance was going sideways. So Bitcoin dominance had gone up as well. Election happened on the 8th of November. Bitcoin dominance held until about December, and then off a cliff it goes as Bitcoin. Very different. This will not happen, obviously, because altcoins were so small, so new. It was such a small percentage of the market that Bitcoin dominance was much easier to drop, even as Bitcoin itself went on this big run. So I wouldn't expect a similar move, but the one parallel you can take from both of those elections is that Bitcoin dominance did top post-election within a few weeks. Now, I don't think it's going to have this massive collapse. I think if anything, it's going to be more like a 2020 type of move. And you see Bitcoin dominance continue through for a while after the election, and then you see a top. It is probably time for altcoins to start attracting some proper flows. I think this will depend on Trump. And I think you'll see more of an altcoin move if Trump is elected. But I think in both situations, my guess would be when Bitcoin starts to hit all-time high, you see altcoin really picking up and Bitcoin dominance starting to drop. As I think Bitcoin breaking 75 will be the signal for altcoins to get moving. And structurally, let's just look through the top three. So Bitcoin structure, like I've said, looking good. ETH structure, not really. Lots of work to do. Weekly downtrend, right? So ETH has a weekly downtrend. Highs to lows, to lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. And then internal structure is actually starting to build some higher highs and higher lows. Right? Low, high, higher low, higher high. This is a higher low. It's more of an equal low, but it is a higher low technically. So ETH is trying to build some structure within its range, within its previous levels. And if you take this previous weekly structure from over here, which is all the way down there, these are all green candles, that was the top. So ETH hasn't actually broken that initial weekly level. It's come all the way back to it. So it's a full mean reversion, which leads to not a higher low bounce and moon. It leads to consolidation, which we're seeing. And so when ETH can get above here, that's when it has actually held the retest and is then clearly making higher highs and lows. So that's what you want to look for ETH. And for Solana, we have good structure as well. I showed this on weekend workshop, which is still live for now. It will disappear today. So if you haven't seen the weekend workshop, go to the daily stream channel and check it out. Last chance. And internally, Solana is building up some weekly structure. So the majors look good. Obviously ETH weakest of all, but Bitcoin and Sol strong. And Bitcoin Dominus looking well. Bitcoin setting up pretty well going into the election. 70k is still a big level though. Don't forget that all of this hinges upon 70. 70k is the level. And it has not closed above it yet. It tried to last week. We closed below. It's absolutely essential. Bitcoin closes above 70. That is the number. That gives us a clarification that we are above all-time high of previous cycle. All-time high previous cycle was about 69. There's been one weekly close above 70. Every other weekly close has been a wick and back below. So Bitcoin needs to shift that for its first sign that it's starting to break through to new levels into price discovery on a close basis, as you see here. That's it. GM. Massive week. I mean, huge week, big week. If you see the meme, the best meme of all. Week size, big. Bunch of streams. Today, triple streaming. So starting at 5 p.m. UTC, the regular time. Weekly Outlook Live. We'll do some shitcoins. Shitcoin Sunday is going to be Shitcoin Monday. We'll do Ask Michael, taking your questions as always. And Blue Belts Mentorship Monday. Followed by, huge week of streams. Check all that out. See you then. GM.